Good evening, everyone. So, in this video, I want to talk about how I grew up and I just want to tell a little bit about my story. So, I was born and raised in Romania for the first 9 years of my life, and then we moved to the United States. The first state that we moved here was Portland, Oregon. It was great. Great. Great childhood, great memories, you know, you name it. Great everything. So, in Romania, when I was born with congenital cataracts, and you know, at that time, the doctors wouldn't operate on infants that were born with congenital cataracts due to technology not being as advanced as it is today. I know in the United States, I think at that time, when an infant had cataracts, I think they would operate on the baby, but in Romania, they didn't. They told my parents that I have to be 7 years old, right? And by then, your visual system definitely develops. And guess what? It's too late. You know why? Because you develop amblyopia. You know what amblyopia means? Amblyopia means when your visual system didn't fully develop. So you can see, but you can't see detail. You can't see well enough to drive. You know what I'm saying? So, anyways, I don't want to go into the details of this all, but that was the case with me. So, I remember, well, from what my parents told me, being 10 months old, and we were at a prayer meeting, and then my parents, you know, gave me something to play with because you know how babies can be restless, and, you know, they start to cry sometimes or whatever, and they gave me something to play with. And then after the prayer was done, you know, I started seeing the, I think it was a postcard that I was holding. I started to see it, and then I saw my toes move, and I wanted to grab them, right? So the Lord gave me my sight, but not fully, I was basically living under, behind an opaque veil. Think about, to help you better understand, think about looking through a bathroom window. You know how they have those translucent windows that you can see things, you can see color and shapes, but you can't really tell what they are. That's exactly how I was seeing, kind of like that. I don't obviously fully remember how I saw, but it was pretty bad, right? And we came to the United States. Of course, they've done some tests on my eyes, so on and so forth. Summer of 1990, I got my cataracts removed. I got glasses, and of course, I was able to see as much as I can see, just like I do now. Doctors told my parents that, hey, your son was never going to be able to drive. When I heard that, I was like extremely devastated. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to be able to drive, right? This sucks. But, anyways, and then, of course, I went to school. I was bullied in school a lot, and it's just crazy, how some kids can be so mean. But if you really sit and think about it, I've thought about it and done some studies to where, why certain kids do what they do. And I'm not saying that they should be doing that. I do not agree, but because they're going through a tough time at home, they probably, going through abuse or whatever. That's why they're acting the way they're acting. That's definitely not an excuse, and that should not be tolerated. But you get the point. I was bullied, um, especially middle school. I was bullied like crazy, and there was a period of time when I was kind of afraid to go to school. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go to school. I'm going to be made fun of again. And I'm like, oh my gosh. But by God's grace, I've had a very supportive family, parents especially, My parents were extremely supportive, and they encouraged me and so on and so forth. And that's by God's grace and my parents' prayers and my parents' support. That's why I am where I'm at right now. You know, the the man that I became right now. And Of course, I've worked in a lot of places in my life, and sadly, those kids that bully others as kids, they become bullies as adults as well, sadly. And I've been bullied, not as bad, not to that degree to where, you know, stepped on, spit on. Hey, you know what I'm saying? It's crazy. I remember this one time being in seventh grade and we were running the track. I was going one direction. This other kid came this direction, and as he came, he spit in my face. You know, it's messed up. No point of bringing all that stuff up, but that's exactly what happened. And I remember one time being in math class, seventh grade again. Somebody spit a spit wad in my ear. Just dumb, ridiculous stuff like that. I mean, very pathetic and immature. But again, those kids obviously have been bullied in themselves and probably abused at home, or maybe not. I don't know. Some of those people are just newer souls, and they're still learning. No excuse for them to act this way, like I've mentioned earlier. But anyways, I went through life, and of course I was involved in church. As a young kid, I remember singing my first song in church. Honestly, I don't remember what song it was, but I do remember singing my first song in church. I believe I was like 5 years old. And then, I was exposed to prayer meetings, to being in church, singing. And then, what's it called? Once I learned to play an instrument, I started playing the instrument and singing in church as a young kid. I remember being 12 years old playing the organ in church. That was really, really nice, and that's how I became better. Well, this reminds me of something that me and a young man talked about last Saturday. He's learning to play the guitar, and I told him, man, when am I gonna hear you playing church and singing? And he just looks at me and he's like, I don't know, man, I gotta get better. And I was like, well, how are you gonna get better? By doing it, by being involved, Because I told him, a lot of these people, they tell me, well, you're good, you're good, you're good. But I'm like, well, I became this good because I've practiced a lot. I've sang in church even when I was not even that good. But because I loved music and I loved singing, I loved praising God since I was a young kid, that's what got me better, more confident, and till this day, And it was awesome, And of course, yeah, I was involved in church, still am involved in church, and I know many times being involved in church or being involved with ministry, you get burnt out, and many times I was burnt out. And I remember this one time, April of 2003, we used to have church in the Romanian community in the church where I grew up in Vancouver, Washington. We used to have church Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Tuesday nights prayer, and Thursday nights service. So oftentimes as a kid, I remember going to church Sunday morning. Actually, what do you mean? What am I talking about? I'm saying oftentimes. It's actually every single time. Not unless we were extremely sick, or you know what I mean. But all the time we would go to church every Sunday morning, every Sunday night. There was a period of time when I went every Tuesday night, every Thursday night, and I remember being early 20s, I believe I was like 21, 22, and I I was going through a tough time, man. I was going through a very bad depressive state. I was super depressed because being legally blind, I told myself in the back of my mind, hey, I'm legally blind. Nobody's going to want to marry me, So I was like, man, whatever. So I was extremely, extremely depressed. And one thing that still sticks with me today is that my mom always encouraged me and said, hey, one day God's going to prepare your wife will where you least expect it. It's going to be amazing. Used to think to myself, so I half believed it and I half didn't. So a part of me was telling me, man, that'll be awesome. A part of me was telling me, yeah, right. I don't see that happening. But by God's grace, that's exactly what happened. I got married. I have a beautiful wife. You know, been married for a while, and praise God for that. We went through ups and downs, but by God's grace, we are here and we're well. But anyway, so I was in my younger days, and we were supposed to go to church that Thursday, and my mom told me, "Hey, go to church. There's nobody gonna, there's nobody there to play the piano, right?" So I told her, "Mom, I don't want to go to church." So she told me, "Don't, you know, don't how did she say it? Anyway, she just told me to go. She's like, "You need to go because there's nobody to play." In the back of my mind, I used to think, "Man, I'm sick and tired of being used." There was this in this period of time, I was kind of burnt out. I was like, "Man, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't see I don't see a benefit for me, you know?" So she kept telling me, "Go, go, go, whatever." I'm like, "Okay, whatever, I'll go." And I remember my brother, one of my brothers, younger brothers, he started driving, and he had his license, and him and I, we went to church. We were driving on this highway going about 60, 65 miles an hour, and we were listening to music, and right of a sudden I hear this voice. Obviously it was the voice of the enemy telling me, "Hey, jump out of the car." Then, I was sitting like this in the car. I took my hand and held it. I put it on the door handle. I was not kidding you, this close to open the door and jump out of the car, until I heard the voice of God saying, "Hey, what are you doing? I'm not done with you." And I had my hand like this on the door, and I slowly went like this and put it back on my lap. I'm like, wow. And from that point onward, I was like, man, God still loves me, even though I'm going through depression, even though I'm going through so many things in my life. But yeah, that's one thing. And I remember the first time God spoke to me, like I freaked out. And this is so when the first time God spoke to me, this was like 2 years, a little over 2 years previous to that moment when I was about to commit suicide. Like I was about to do something really, anyways, I was about to do something stupid, that wasn't according to God's will. And I hear God's voice telling me, "Whatever you're doing, stop right now." I looked in the back, man, and I was like, who in the world is talking to me? I freaked out. I'm like, I've never heard a voice like that in my life. I was like, whatever, maybe I'm hallucinating. And then I continued doing what I was doing, and then I hear it again, "Whatever you're doing, stop right now." And I was like, oh my gosh, this is scary. This is weird. Not, it was scary, but it was weird. I'm like, I'm hearing this voice crystal clear, and I'm not understanding who's talking to me, because I looked in the back and I'm like, I don't see anybody. And then the voice tells me again, "Hey, whatever you're doing, stop." And I'm like, wow, okay. This voice spoke to me 3 times, and it was so clear. And I was like, okay, this is God speaking to me. And I remember told me to open the Bible where it talks about Joseph and Mary, how they, when they were supposed to be together because Jesus was born. I mean, she was pregnant with Jesus and so on and so forth, right? And the voice tells me, the voice of God tells me, go read it, and I'm like, hey, God, I've heard this story millions of times in church. Why do I need to read this? I already know it. He's like, no, go read it. And I'm like, what does this have to do with anything, right? So I opened the Bible and read it. I think it was in, let me see if I remember correctly. I think it was in, because I don't want to, I don't want to like make a mistake. I want to make sure that, I think it was in, let me see. It was in Luke, I think. Let's see. So it was Luke chapter 2. If I remember correctly, verse 4. Let me see. All right. So in verse 4, it talks about how Joseph went up from Galilee out of the city of Nazareth into Judea. That's what it's talking about right now. In verse 4, city of David, which is called Bethlehem, okay? Because he was, let me see here. Yeah, because he was of the house and lineage of David, okay? But where does it talk about? Okay, it says to be registered with his wife. Okay, yeah, with Mary, his betrothed wife, who was with child. Okay, so yeah, okay, this is what it was. And when I read this, I was like, what does this have to do with anything, you know? I mean, like I mentioned earlier, God told me just read it. Okay. So I read it. I'm like, okay, I didn't fully understand it. I'm like, okay, whatever. I mean, okay. And then time flew by, and then shortly after, God tells me, and this is okay, mind you, this was in March of 2001. I don't remember which date, and nor does it matter. But I remember it was March 2001, and God tells me, in the clear voice that I've heard minutes before, right? God tells me, hey, I'm gonna prepare you a wife. You're gonna have a family of your own. And I was like, okay, wow. God said, I'm gonna bless you. You're gonna have your own, your own family, your own home, and so on and so forth. And I'm like, wow, praise God. That's. I remember crying, man. Like, I was bawling my eyes out. I was like, wow, this is amazing. Because, at the time I was 20 years old, thinking to myself, man, I'm legally blind. Who on earth is going to marry me, right? I'm good for nothing. I used to kind of think to myself many times, I'm like, man, I can't see that well, I don't know much. I definitely not marriage material, right? I used to think to myself, but God told me this, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And I remember, man, I was like teary-eyed, and I was bawling my eyes out, and I was like, man, I gotta tell my parents this. So I told my mom and dad this, and they were like, wow, they were very, how do I say this? They were definitely happy, I guess, joyful. And then, years passed by, that was 2001, and then 2002, and then I didn't think of these things, man. I honestly did. God told me all this stuff, right? But I was like, okay, whatever. Being a young man, doing my thing, working and enjoying myself with friends, with family, with what I'm saying. You know, doing ministry in church, whatever I was doing. And I was like, okay, I didn't think too much about it. And then, like I've mentioned earlier, 2003 came around, and that's when that big depression just hit me. And I was like, whatever. When I was about to kill myself, and then God told me, hey, I'm not done with you. I'm not through with you. And later on that year, I think it was July, if I remember correctly. I know my wife remembers this a lot more, like a lot more details, but I'm gonna tell you guys what I remember, as much as I remember. But I remember at some point, oh, let me back up actually. Sorry. I'm gonna back up a little bit. So 2001, right? God speaks to me and tells me all that stuff, and then summer came by, so on and so forth. And my wife and her family, they used to come visit, well, us in Vancouver, not me specifically, but they used to come to visit our church. They used to come visit our church in Vancouver, Washington, the church that we were going to, because they had family friends that, they used to hang out with, and this and that. And this is according to my wife. I don't remember this. I was 20 and a half years old. She was 17. I don't remember this, but she said that she remembers that she came that summer of 2001, if I remember correctly. and she came to our church and she said that she remembers me. I didn't play the piano at this time. In this specific, how do I say this? Yeah, this specific time, I guess. I was singing with a group of youth, and she said that she remembers seeing me. She liked the fact that I looked kind of nerdy with the bigger glasses and this and that. And I remember she was telling her sister, "Hey, I like this guy. Looks like he's really calm, and he looks nerdy and this and that." And her sister's like, "Yeah, that guy looks like a dork." You know what I mean? I was like, "Oh, okay, whatever." And she's like, "Well, I don't care. I like him. He's," and it's very interesting. Again, I don't remember any of this stuff, and I know that my wife was telling me that, like, later on that year, 6 months later or so, we went caroling with the youth in the Romanian community. We, you know, Christmas Eve, we have Christmas Eve service, right? And then after our Christmas Eve service, bunch of the youth gets together and we go caroling from house to house. We sing, which is really nice. I've always enjoyed that. And before we were in church practicing, we were in the sanctuary practicing, getting ready to practice some songs. And again, I don't remember this. I'm just saying what my wife told me and what she remembers. So she said that I was sitting because back then, in some of the stricter churches, the men were on one side, the women were on the other side, okay? And obviously, it was really interesting. But so I was on the men's side, and my wife was on the women's side, and she was putting her jacket on the back of the seat, right? So apparently I do the same thing, according to her. I mean, I vaguely remember, but I don't remember exactly. And then, no. So I took my jacket off. She took her jacket off, actually, and so did I. And then she puts it on the back of the seat, and I do the same thing. And this is what she told me. My wife was telling me that back then she was thinking, what is wrong with this guy? Why is he copying me? But obviously I didn't do it to copy her, because even me with my limited eyesight, I couldn't tell, I didn't pay attention, but I couldn't tell that, hey, that was her. What was she doing? I mean, if I really, really, truly paid attention, I probably, but anyway, so according to her, she said that I did that and it was whatever, and I remember going caroling. This I do remember going caroling, and I was eating, man, ever since I was a kid. I mean, even now, man, I'm a foodie and I like to eat. And sometimes when I eat pretty fast, right? And like I mentioned earlier, we were going caroling from house to house, and every household, they would have like, pastries or food or different things, and we'd just grab ourselves a plate. And then I remember just holding my food like this and just, eating. And I actually remember. She was wearing like a silver jacket and a white hat. She comes towards me and kind of gives me the stare. I was like, what? Why is she staring at me like that? And I guess, according to her, she was saying that that I didn't eat for the rest of that night. And I don't know if it was from her looking at me that way, or I don't know what it was. But I do remember that moment. And I remember this other moment where we went caroling at our lead pastor's house, and he had this alley that you would go down, and it was completely dark. It was dark in there, and I was like, man, it's dark in here. And I remember very well. She's like, well, duh, it's dark for everybody. And the way she said it, I was like, God, I want to punch her in the face. I mean, it was interesting, man. It was super interesting. But what am I trying to go with this? The thing is that, because I was talking about my mom telling me that, with the marriage and everything, and God told me that He's gonna prepare me a wife. So I'm gonna get there. Sorry that I'm like prolonging, and I'm when I tell my stories, I take forever to get to the point. A lot of people hate that, but anyways, so the idea is that, so all this happened and so on and so forth, and then years pass by, and 2003, like I said, I was in a deep depressive state, and and then that summer, I believe it was July, I don't know how. Oh, one of our friends, my friend Sam's sister, he gave my email to my wife, back then. And we just, used to talk through email. And then I remember just emailing back and forth. And I'm gonna be honest, man. I regret the fact that I deleted all the emails. I was just such a, I don't know how to explain it. Like, I was at that moment of time where I was like, okay, I don't know. I don't need girls in my life. It's just weird because who knows? Nobody's gonna get married to me because of you know, my vision impairment and so on and so forth. But anyways, I would read the emails and I would just like, whatever, okay. And she asked me, hey, what is your phone number? So I gave her my cell phone number and my home number. Well, at that time, I had my brother had the cell because he drove, and for me, I guess it was kind of useless in a way to have. I guess because I didn't really drive, I was always with somebody. So, but anyways, long story short, I was at work. I gave her my number. When I got home, well, she called my home phone number, our phone number, and one of my younger sisters, picked up, and she was talking to her and this and that, and then my sister finished talking to her, and I remember I was still kind of like in the depressive mode. I was still depressed, but not like to the point where I was about to kill myself like I was before, right? But I was still depressed. I was like, you know what? Yeah, life's not worth it. Or kind of, you know what I mean? I was just kind of like still in that state of depression, if you will. And I remember I was like sitting down. I was just like sitting on the couch, and my mom was like, "Man, call up the girl." And I was like, "Nah, I'm good." You know? She's like, "Come on, just call her up. See what see what she wants and whatever, you never know." I was like, "Whatever, okay, I'll call her." And I remember calling her, and my first thing was, instead of saying, "Hey, my name is Cosmin, how are you?" blah blah blah. I think she knew my name, but I mean, obviously she knew my name because of the emails and stuff. But instead of saying, being more professional about it, I picked up the phone and I was like, "Yo, what up?" That's exactly what I said. And when my mom heard that, she's like, "Man, what is wrong with you? If I was that girl, I would have hung up in your face." I'm like thinking to myself, "Well, you're not the girl, so who cares?" you know? But I said it like that, and she's like, "Hey, whatever." And then I remember we were talking, and she told me about herself more. I told her about myself. I told her we were talking and discussing different things and telling each other our interests. And I remember talking to her, the first conversation, I think it was like, if I remember correctly, it was a couple hours, a good couple hours. And when I talked to this woman, I'm like, man, it feels like I know her from somewhere. Like, we connected so quick, like not just quick, but we connected so well. And I'm thinking to myself, interesting. I'm legally blind. I mean, and I'm thinking to myself, maybe I don't think this girl knows yet, but wow, a girl's talking to me. And I was like, wow, I guess I am worth something. And, you know, we were talking, and I'm like, I kind of like this girl. She's really sweet, really intelligent and all that stuff. And then we kept talking, and then every night, I remember back then, because a lot of the times with the home phone, we used to have two home phones, and sometimes when I used to talk to to her, my mom would like, pick up the phone on the other line and listen. She's like, "Hey, just let the girl go to sleep." And I'm like, "Mom, what are you doing?" But at some point, I would call her with my cell phone, and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna go. And then her dad used to do the same thing, and sometimes I would hear him breathing heavily, like, I'm like, oh man. And I told her, "Is your dad listening?" She's like, "Yeah." And we just kept talking, and I remember, I think this was like September of 2003. I asked her, "Hey, so if you were to get married, who'd you get married to?" In the back of my mind, I kept saying, watch, she's not gonna say me. She's not gonna say me. And we waited there for a couple seconds, and she's like, "Well, duh, silly." it would be you. And when she said that, oh my gosh, man, I was crying like a young kid. No joke. I was crying. I was like, wow. You, man, I was thinking to myself, wait a minute, this is not reality, is it? I was like, wow, no way. I cannot believe that. And then we just kept talking. Then eventually I asked her out. I'm like, hey, would you want to be my girlfriend? She's like, sure. I asked her out, and we just kept it. Our relationship was, it sucked in a way because she was in Sacramento. I was in Vancouver, Washington. She was in Sacramento, California, and it was um, far distance, and it was definitely, it was good. It was awesome the way we started, but it was just because it was far. It was difficult, and once I started to know her more, and I remember when she first came to visit, I was nervous. She was nervous, but I'm like, dude, one day this woman's gonna be my wife, And I was, dude, this is so cool. But um, then we started making wedding plans and so on and so forth. And I remember this one time. So this whole time we used to have this men's group, like young men's group, with this elderly brother that we used to do Bible study with him, and he was really awesome, really knowledgeable, and we just had an awesome time with him. We'd open up and pray together and this and that. But I remember, God would tell me, hey, this is gonna be your wife. God told me before, and I remember being at this men's group that we had, young men's group. We used to call him Monday Club. I remember that, and me being excited, that, hey, I have a girlfriend one day, she's going to be my fiance. And then the next thing, she's going to be my wife. I was like super excited, and I told them, hey guys, man, God told me that, this woman that I'm talking to, she's going to be my wife. And one of the guys, I used to be really good friends with him, but man, sadly, he went astray, went away from the Lord, unfortunately. But what's it called? So he said, he's like, yo, bro, how do you know Satan didn't tell you that? Dude, that hit me like a rock. That literally hit me like a rock. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is not okay. And I remember, I needed to use the bathroom. I went to the bathroom, and I was just like, kind of like sitting there. I'm like, God, confirm to me, is this from you? And he confirmed it. He's like, don't listen to what anybody says. They will see with their own eyes. And that's exactly what happened. It's exactly what happened. And I remember a lot of them. Oh my gosh, man. A lot of my friends back then, I mean, they were, when they saw that ring on my finger, they're like, nah, dude, nah, no way. But man, God blessed us so much in the nearly 22 years of marriage, and I'm just grateful and thankful to the Almighty God that He blessed us so much. I don't want to make this longer. I shall continue in the next video, but it has been a great journey since then, and I'm grateful to the Almighty God that He's been on my side. He's been on all of our side, and I'm just so grateful that He helped us grow. I got married young, meaning I was 23 and a half, but it was difficult. It was very difficult. Okay, I shouldn't say that me being legally blind, because that's not the difficult part. The difficult part is that I was extremely immature. And getting married, it was great. It was awesome. And I'm grateful and thankful to the Almighty God for that. But the thing is that because of me being so immature, we've encountered a lot of problems, But by God's grace, through it all, He helped me and my wife grew. He helped us grow spiritually quite a bit, you know? So I'm just grateful and thankful. But thanks for listening. We'll continue the rest of the story in the next video. And yeah, you all have a good one, and God bless. See you next time.